Most of the limitations in our lives only exist because we accept them. But let me tell you this. It's funny, Tuesday, I was having a conversation with my team. We were talking about the title of the show. And one of the titles, if you remember our day, was that we were thinking about was most people will stay stuck forever. And I think Sarah was like, oh, my goodness, that doesn't sound good. Like, we shouldn't do that. Let me tell you the truth about something. Most people will stay stuck forever. I hate to say it, but unfortunately, most people will stay stuck forever. Not because they have to, but because they're unwilling to take the action that's necessary to get unstuck.
If you wanna be about it, come on, let's talk about it. Change up the things you see. Open your mind to possibilities. Find your power, passion, and your purpose. You know it's time for you to walk in greatness. Let's murder mediocrity. Slay your goals, live out your dreams. Now, inspirational perspective. Open your mind to a better life. It's time to live a dream. Your purpose now. Inspirational perspective. Let's slay your goals.
I want to open with a set of questions. Have you ever felt like no matter what you do, you just can't seem to move forward? Like no matter what I do, I just can't seem to move forward. Like there's something invisible that's holding me back. I know that I have very clear aspirations, and every time I try to put my hand to it, it's like something that's pulling me. Something's pulling me away from it. Just asking that question reminds me of my late 20s, man. Like, post 25, I started, getting really serious about goal setting. And in those I would say the first 5 years, I felt like I was setting the same goals all the time and just stuck, like literally stuck where I was. And I was making some movement, but not necessarily the movement I wanted to make in all the areas of my life. I was making some movement. But, professionally, I got promoted here and, make a little more money there, things like that. But when it came down to like what I aspired to do outside of survival, because I think about work as survival in some ways, I just felt stuck. I remember I was so stuck, I wrote this poem called Procrastination. And the poem was all about how well I procrastinated. Like I was the king of procrastination. Like, if you count on somebody to, be late or somebody that's going to wait, that's me in so many ways. And it was kind of like an ode to my frustration with myself because I just noticed how stuck I was. And it wasn't until I started really addressing what was happening for me mentally that I started to make traction. And I believe that most people never break free from their mental constraints, and as a result, they never truly break free in their lives. And so part of what I want to talk about today is like what's holding you back mentally, like what's holding you back in your thinking. As a man thinketh, so is he. And most people never break free from their mental constraints, and it's not because they don't want to. I believe most of us want to. It's because we just don't realize what's holding us back mentally. Like what's holding us back. So the big question that I want to ask today is, why do most people stay stuck? And then, more importantly, how do we make sure that you don't stay stuck? And I think for each of us, it's going to be a very different answer. If there were a silver bullet, I'd already be a billionaire. I'd be selling it. It's a very different answer. And ultimately, I believe that it's only us who can arrive at that answer. You can get support. You can get therapeutic support to shift your strategies. You can get a coach who supports you in gaining more awareness, like reflecting things like, well, I noticed this in your thinking. But you got to choose it. At the end of the day, you got to choose it. You got to decide that I'm going to go after this thing. I'm going to invest in getting over this mountain. So here's a preview of what I want to talk about today. 1, why people unconsciously sabotage themselves. Like why we actually, we could point at other people, you're a hater. But it's like the worst hater you have is yourself, and why we often sabotage ourselves. Number 2, the hidden mental traps that keep us from growing. Number 3, how to break free and take control of your life. And then 4, provide you some real life examples of people who have done it, who've literally done it. And then we'll end the show with a challenge, for how we can begin to step over these mental barriers. Years ago, I did this show called Identifying and Breaking. I think it was Breaking. Was it Breaking? Identifying and Removing or something like that, your mental constraints. Did this show. And the team and I, we were looking at it last week. And I'm like, man, I got to do that again. It lines right up with what we've been talking about. And one of the reasons I did the show was because I saw a picture. And this picture was of a horse that was tethered to a lawn chair. And because of the work I do, like things like that really jump out at me. And I was looking at this and I was like, wait a second. like the horse, whoever was riding the horse rolled up, and then they took the, what do you call it? The reins. They took the reins and they got off the horse and they just slapped it around the edge of the lawn chair, a plastic lawn chair, not a rod iron lawn chair. I'm talking about a plastic lawn chair, the one you could pick up with one hand and toss. And it slid around the lawn chair, and then the horse stayed. The horse just stood there, like, all right, I'll be here when you get back. And if you ever, something cool to YouTube is how to break a horse. And if you ever watch how they break a horse, like a horse will buck and kick, and eventually it begins to believe that the human that is riding it, the human that is pulling on the reins, is the master. And slowly the same horse, the same Mustang that used to run free and seemed like it couldn't be tamed, was wild and would never, ever allow a human being to ride his back. Eventually, you can get it to a point where all you got to go is, and it'll come right over to you, put his head down. Now, the thing about a horse is that humans were given dominion over everything on the planet. So there's something in its nature that says, I will concede. And so if a human pushes himself to say, I am the master of you, the horse will concede. And by the way, this is just about every living creature on the planet will concede to a human being. It's by design. But it's not by design for a human being to concede to another human being. And it's also not by design for human beings to just give up. If we just gave up, we would not have survived. In fact, most of us will go the distance for survival. There are folks right now listening to me who they like, yeah, man, I ain't ran a mile and I can't tell you how long. right? Let something that is about to threaten your very survival happen, and you will run that mile. You might do it tired. You might feel like you're going to die on the other side of it, but you would run that mile. Messed up knee and all. You be hobbling the whole way. Hold on, y'all. Oh, all the excuses you have around, but let your survival be at stake. You're going to push yourself. So then, if we have that capacity, like there's something that we can tap into. Like, how do we learn to tap into that in a healthy way, not in a way that's going to hurt you, but in a healthy way for our goals? And how do we ensure that we're not like the horse, that because of what folks said to us when we were young, because of what a parent or a sibling or a cousin or whomever, grandma, grandpa, did to us, we're still standing by the chair. Like mentally, you've been broken, and you're still standing by the chair in life. Another question for you to think about is, what if your biggest limitations isn't the world around you? And I think a lot of times we'll put off, well, Linnell, you don't understand my circumstance. You don't understand the situation I'm in. And what I'm saying to you is, what if your biggest limitation isn't the world around you? Let me give you an example of what I mean. I can remember I was 27, 28, close to your age, Ade, where my main excuse was, man, if I just had more time. If I just had more time, I would be able to do all these things. Like, if I didn't have so much pressing on me, I would be able to do all these. I would be able to do all these things. At the time, I had, I was doing a little real estate, had, some real estate, and I had a job. And when I think about it, it makes me smile because it's like, that's it. That was, when it came to responsibility, all I had to do was feed myself, take care of a few tenants, and go to work. That's it. That's all I had to do. Now, for somebody, that can seem like a lot, but I'm looking at this in contrast to the life I live today, right? And I'll be like, man, if that's all I had, do you all know that if that was the only responsibility I had now, what I would be creating out here? I'm sharing this because what I learned was that it was more about my mentality than my circumstance. It was more about what I was telling myself I couldn't do and the reasons I was telling myself I couldn't do it, more so than the circumstance. And I realized that today. Like, back then, I didn't have time, but I might sleep 10 hours on a Saturday. I didn't have time, though. I didn't have time. Like, that's the reason I couldn't get things done. I would, probably have a few drinks with some friends and let time get away on an afternoon, on a Friday afternoon. When we start at 4 and you look up, you're like, man, it's 10 o'clock. Oh, my goodness, have we been here this entire time just talking? And by the way, I didn't see that as a problem. But I mean, you got to have your social time, Linnell. You got to enjoy yourself, enjoy life. I didn't see that as a problem at all. But then, fast forward 24 hours later, I could be looking at my goals going, man, if I just had time, I could get this done. And often we don't really see ourselves. And the other part of it is we don't really believe ourselves. And when I say we don't believe ourselves, the reason why we're not investing the time is because that idea you have, there's a part of you that doesn't really believe you could take it all the way. There's a part of you that doesn't really believe that if you make this investment, you'll see the money come back around. I honestly believe one of the biggest reasons most people don't invest in themselves is not because they don't see the value of the product or the value of the program. It's because there's something inside of them that personally believes that if I put this money out here, I might let myself down again. I might not actually show up. I might not actually do the work. And I'd rather spend the money on something tangible that I can feel than to put it over here and disappoint myself again. Like, I just might not, I might actually disappoint myself. And that fear of failure and that fear of personal rejection, people will choose the illusion of certainty over opportunity. And let me explain what I mean. The illusion of certainty is, well, if I hold this money for something more tangible, something I can feel, then at least I know. Like, at least I know I didn't waste it. That's what I mean by the illusion of certainty. Because isn't it a waste if you do purchase something? Let's say you get a really nice designer bespoke jacket, and you only get to wear it twice because it's out of style next year. Like, wouldn't that be a waste too? And by the way, these things happen. How many of us have spent a couple of $100s, me included, right? Like, think about it. How many of us spent a few $100s on something that we were really excited about? And then when you really look at the wear, like, did you really get the ROI on that? You really get the ROI on that brand new, like whatever it is, like, you kind of think about it, you like, man, I ain't with. And by the way, we ignore that. Like, you'll put that out your mind. Well, I'll use it again. So then you put it up in the closet, and there it is for 5 years, 10 years, 15. It's gonna come back in style, and I'm gonna use it again. That and all the other things in the back of the closet that are taking up space. But this is how we think about things, and because it's tangible, we excuse it. I believe one of the reasons these type of things happen, the real reasons people stay stuck, a lot of it has to do with our mental conditioning from childhood. Hey, stay safe. Be careful. As a father, I hear myself say it. Hey, man, be careful. Be careful. My son, he'll jump off anything. Like, it's just like, I can get up there, he'll run and boom, jump. Hey, man, be careful. And, he looks at me like I'm crazy because right now he always lands on 2 feet. And here's the thing. He might be right. Dad might be crazy. And the reason Dad might be crazy is because Dad sprung his ankle one time. And now Dad is putting that on him. Hey, slow down. Be careful. Because I love him. And my love for him will then limit him. Now, should little boys jump off things? Absolutely. How do they get their balance and agility? Might come a day where he has to jump off something to actually save his life. So yeah, he should be jumping. So why do I say be careful? My stuff. My pain, my hurt, my fall. And what we do, and this is what was done to us, is we place those fears of falling on our children, not even realizing that we're still, in many ways, dealing with our parents' fear of us falling. Be careful. Stay safe. Another one is you're not good enough. And this one is subtle, man. And it comes from almost every direction. I was watching this old video, Tiger Woods, when he first started playing pro. He was young. And many of you probably seen this video. He was getting interviewed by a reporter who I think had been a player himself. And he was asking Tiger Woods, what are your expectations? What are your expectations of this tournament? And Tiger looked at him, said, well, I'm going to go out there and give my all and play. And the idea is that I win. And the reporter was like, Oh, come, young man, you know. And then the reporters start to put his stuff, his ability, his lack of ability onto Tiger. And I imagine this reporter, like, he really tried to play golf. Like, you know, and he came up short, probably never ranked in the top 10, played for years, end up reporting. Now he's got this young man in front of him that, by the way, doesn't look like the average golfer. And this young man is saying that he can win, and he started putting his stuff on him. And he literally looked at Tiger, and he said, I mean, you don't see the value of ranking? And Tiger looked at him like, no, man, if I'm going to play, I'm playing for first place. And he kind of sneered at him, like, how dare you? Like, how dare you play for first place? He says, well, these are pros that you're up against. And Tiger says, I know, I'm aware of that, but I wouldn't be out, going out there to play if, for anything less than first. He was like, I mean, me and my dad have always said that, first is it. And if you're second, you're not first. And third, well, I mean, I really don't want to play for that. And this reporter looked at Tiger and said, you'll learn. And Tiger just smiled at him. Like, well, you watch and see. I wonder what Tiger had that allowed that to bounce off him. And often, many of us, that could be the thing that takes us out. It could be the very thing that takes us out. Well, if they don't think I can, am I in the right place? Am I doing the right thing? Am I playing myself? And we'll start asking questions. Another example I can think of is in the movie King Richard. And in this movie, I believe there was a reporter who was interviewing Venus, and her father was sitting nearby, and the reporter started saying, well, you're young. She says, yes. He says, so what makes you think you can move to this pro level and win? And her father jumped in, hey, now you're not going to mess with her confidence now. And everybody around them thought like, man, he being the most, he's doing the most. But he understood something. There is power in simply believing. There is power in simply believing. And if somewhere, somehow, somebody shifted your ability to believe, then consider that might be your mental constraint. And here we go, full circle again, back to belief. Like, is your trouble with belief because somebody planted a seed in you? And maybe today it's time to think about, where'd that seed get planted? And is it time to pull it out, like pull that weed out your life? I think about all these different examples. I even think about myself. I can recall years ago when I was told, like, oh, you'll never play basketball at a college level. You're barely 6 feet. You weigh 100. And I remember that. And there's two ways that we go. For me, my parents put something in me. It was like a resilience. Like, don't let, kind of like if you go to The Pursuit of Happiness, where Chris Gardner told his son, don't let anybody tell you what you can't do. Like, you show them, not even me. Don't even let me tell you what you can't do. That thing put something inside me. And I was like, okay, I'm going to show you. And I worked a little harder. I spent more time on my moves, on my shot, because I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you that you don't get to speak into my life that way. And I mean, are you willing to express that type of grit? Like, are you willing? Like, I don't know. Like, for me, one of my strengths is competition. Like, I took it personal. I think to this day I'm that way. Even now, 48 going on 49, a younger guy can be like, man, you can't. I'll be like, okay. Like, and by the way, I'll just get quiet and get in the gym, right? It's that mentality. But all of it is mentality. And that's my point. Like, what is your mentality? And the beautiful thing about mentality is mentality can be transformed. But more importantly, I want to spend some time talking about this thing, comfort. And the reason I find comfort to be, is fascinating to me, and in particular for our community. Because most of us aren't, like when you really look at it, most of us aren't really comfortable. I think we fooled ourselves to believe that we're comfortable. And I think a lot of it has to do with the level of personal conviction we have around what comfort really is. Is it comfortable to not have a savings account? And if you do, is it comfortable to not have enough to secure you for at least 3 months if something happened? Like, is that comfortable? I think we have a skewed view of what comfort really is. So most of us, we live in our comfort zone. And at least in my community, the people I know, you're really not comfortable, though. Like let's be clear, you're really not comfortable. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, a week ago, it was what, 1 degree? Some of you woke up like, will my car start? Like, is that comfortable? Is that how you want to be 5 years from now? Is that comfortable? Who said that it has to be that way? That's not comfortable. Unless we've grown comfortable with the struggle. Well, that's what it is. One of the things about the comfort zone is that it will normalize the struggle and actually make it comfortable. This is what I've always known. The anxiety I feel about cold weather in my car, it's been that way for years. It's comfortable. So then I wonder sometimes if part of what supports us with getting unstuck is to actually open our eyes and become dissatisfied with what's going on. And I'm not talking about a lack of gratitude. Like, grateful for what the Creator has given me, but at the same time, dissatisfied with the struggle. I require more, especially as a child of God. And the trouble with comfort zones are addictive because as you begin to aspire to do something different, there's a physiological response that says, woo, 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 don't do that. No, that's nah. You sure you want to do that? It feels a bit uncomfortable. And as a result, we'll move right back into the middle of our struggle. Well, this is what I know. And then the last reason I believe people stay stuck before we go into the next hour is because you don't really understand what's possible. Like, somewhere along the way, your potential's been robbed of you. And because your potential's been robbed of you, you don't realize that you stopped a quarter of the way in terms of where you should be going, where you could be going. You don't realize you stopped halfway. Like, okay, you've been blessed, but that don't even touch the surface of where the Creator wants to take you. But because you don't really realize what's possible, you lack clarity on what's possible, you believe there's nothing else to chase. Linnell's not talking to me right now. I have my 3-month reserve. My car starts every winter. I have my now nice home in the south suburbs. We're comfortable. My heat bill is paid. My light bill is paid. Everything's fine. I have my savings. I travel a little bit. Like those others, though, I'm praying for them. But you're scared to tap into your purpose. You're scared to shake it up and really do the work. Maybe I am talking to you. And on the inside, like you're stuck. You know you're stuck. In my conversations with clients, Slayer Goals members, etc., a few of and I call these mental barriers. And I'm going to give you the reason why I believe most of these are mental barriers in a minute. For each one of them, I'm going to share an example of someone who overcame it. I don't have enough time. It's one of those one of those big time barriers. And by the way, these are all things that maybe I might think, and I'm going to kind of tell you how I work through it, where it doesn't stop me from doing what's next. I don't have enough time. And then I think to myself, like, man, whoever the acting president, whether it was, back in the day when it was Obama, I used to think about that, like, he's got more on his plate than I do. You get where I'm going? You look at some of these CEOs and multimillionaires, like they got more on their plate than I do. Like, how are they figuring it out? And what do I need to do mentally to rearrange how I show up for myself and how I show up for my family? I don't have enough time. That's how you know it's a story. It's a personal story. Another one, I'm too old. I'm too young. I mean, I can give you examples. I just saw something from a report on a 15-year-old that basically created a multi-million-dollar technology. So it's like, okay, so it's not really about youth. It's about vision and action, because that 15-year-old believed they could create it. That's where they dedicated their time. They created it. Same thing with age. I mean, Colonel Sanders, KFC was started by a gentleman in his 70s. I was watching the founder, Ray Kroc, was in his 50s. And there's one part in the movie, that's an interesting movie, The Founder. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's an interesting movie. But, he was driven. One thing that, whether you like how he moved or not, he was clear on what he wanted to create. And I remember where he was, trying to get investment dollars for McDonald's, and the guys were making jokes about all the products he had sold over the years. Like, is this like this product? Remember the vacuum? Ha, ha, ha. And they were laughing at him. And he was just like, but he still showed up. And he was like, this is different from all of those. And if you don't, like, he still sold it with confidence. Sometimes many of us, we might walk away. Oh, man, I done messed up. I done made too many mistakes. And it's like he just kept. And there's something about persistence. Towards the end of the movie, he has this statement. I wish I could remember it verbatim. But these are the kind of things that stick out to me in movies. And he goes, you might ask yourself how a washed up, over 50 salesman created an empire like this. And he says, and he kind of goes, he gives his resume, all the things he did, all the things he struggled with. He was like, I'll tell you one thing, persistence. And I was like, yeah, persistence. You keep pushing the same button until it works. I don't have enough money. I was listening to this guy. He was kind of, he was saying that there's two ways of thinking when it comes to money. He said, one way is I don't have enough money, so the money I get, I hoard and I spend. He said, and people like that, typically, they don't have enough money. He said, then you have the other person who says, I don't have enough money, and the money they get, they use to make more money, and they get wealthy. He said, both are driven by this conversation, I don't have enough money. It's just two different actions. And the really, really wealthy person says, because think about it, if they felt like they had enough money, they just pause and go, get on a cruise ship or something, right? It's like, but instead they're like, I don't have enough money. How do I turn this $100 into $200? It's a conversation. Which way do you think about it? What's your mental barrier? What's your narrative? Here's another one. I need to be perfect before I start. I can remember when I was plagued with the desire for perfection. And because I was plagued with the desire for perfection, I had all these ideas, and I couldn't start any of them because before I could actually kick it off, I had to have the perfect plan, and I had to know how to execute it perfectly. So I had to know how, and I had to ensure the plan was perfect. And guess what? I never got them started because the plan would never be perfect. And at some point, we have to realize that it's going to be messy. What matters is that you start. And what matters is after you start, you don't quit. Most of the limitations in our lives only exist because we accept them. I don't know. Maybe some of you have some mental chains that I didn't mention there. Feel free to give me a phone call. Let me know what you're dealing with. 773-591-1690. What are your mental chains? What have you distinguished? But let me tell you this. It's funny. Tuesday, I was having a conversation with my team. We were talking about the title of the show. And one of the titles, if you remember our day, was that we were thinking about was most people will stay stuck forever. And I think Sarah was like, oh, my goodness, that doesn't sound good. Like we should, we shouldn't do that. Let me tell you the truth about something. Most people will stay stuck forever. I hate to say it, but unfortunately, most people will stay stuck forever. Not because they have to, but because they're unwilling to take the action that's necessary to get unstuck. I was on this safari in Uganda, and it rained the night before. We were in these trucks, and we're going through, these dirt roads. We're on these dirt roads, and we see a few other people. They're stuck in the mud, and they can't move. And, the driver, we had a bigger truck. He gets around them. And I'm looking at our guide. We got the driver, the guy's in the front seat. I say, hey, he going to stay on this road? Like, we done seen people stuck. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's only a matter of time. Like, you get where I'm going? Like, we going to stay on this road. So he starts looking at it. He says, hey, man, we probably should be careful. And he's like, oh, we're good. We're good. He goes right down the road. We see a truck stuck in front of us. He goes right down the road. What do you think happened? We got stuck. And I think sometimes, like, we'll see what has someone else stuck. Oh, yeah, that's, that would never be me. And it's like, man, look, if I can learn from you, I saw this is what got my man stuck in his health. I'm not doing that. This is what got her stuck in her relationship. I'm not doing that. You remember, like, oh, no, I'll be good. And there's a particular pain to staying stuck. Like, what does 5 years from now look like for you if nothing changes? Like, if nothing changed, 5 years, 1,700 plus odd days, nothing changes. And this is why I believe, like, we have to get to a point where it's like, I have to do it now. Like, do it now, because then that way, come 2030, I'm not worried about the same things. And then what about this one? Like, just regret. Because then, let's say nothing changes in 5 years, and then you look back, and you're like, man, I thought I should have done this in 2025. I can't tell you all how many times that I've delivered a speech, I've trained an audience, and someone will come up to me and say, I wish I had heard that earlier. You know what my response is? It's okay. You heard it now. You know what? When someone says to me, I wish I heard it earlier, how I hear it is, if I heard it 5 years ago, I would have done something with it. And I'm telling you, like, you got 5 years, God willing, in front of you. Like, why are we concerned? Why are you regretting you didn't hear it before? Now you heard it. What are you going to do? And then it's this thing in society where it just kind of conditions us to settle for mediocrity. Like, and the people around you will be like, it's okay. Hey, man, look at you doing good for yourself, huh? You all right? And don't get to telling them about your dreams. They be like, hey, man, why are you going so hard on yourself? I didn't say I was going hard on myself. I was telling you where I want to go. But there is a cost to playing small. And the cost of playing small is continually missing opportunities. Many of us, because we're just not activating our vision, the opportunities are flying right by. We talked about the reticular activating system last week. Like, the vision is keen on supporting us and seeing what's for us. Stagnant relationships, financial limitations. Oh, I wish I could travel like that. Do it. Create a plan and do it. Every day you delay, you're choosing your current comfort, your current struggle over your dreams. One of the things I always say is I'd rather have the tension of my goals than the tension of mediocrity. I'd rather be a little stressed or maybe slightly anxious about where I'm going than stressed and anxious about not understanding what might come and if I can handle it. It's just like, I'd rather be like thinking about, man, how are we going to create that, than wondering, how am I going to survive this?
White folks have no problem with receiving black people's money, but they don't talk about it. They're never going to say, hey, I'm going to go take black people's money. They do it, but they make sure for a fact they're going to build their families and their community, and they're going to build generational wealth. So I think that one little spot there, of course, you should extract all the resources that you can from those who want to spend in truth and righteousness. But you never have to, what would be the word, quantify. I'm speaking to all people, and I'm not. White folks don't do it, no other ethnicity. And they come to our communities every day and extract all the resources out and go home and make sure their spirituality, whatever their codes of conduct are, they make sure they stand on that, 10 toes down on their family. We're the only one that has to always go but or and. You don't have to do that.
It wasn't a but. It wasn't a but. And here's the thing, Art. I don't get to choose. The creator, when he places a purpose inside of us, he tells us where the work and what the work should be and how the work should go. And so it's not something that I get to choose. I don't get to choose who I speak to. I don't get to choose where I make an impact. He places me in spaces, and then my job is to make an impact. And I believe that. And then here's the other thing about, it's interesting. One of the gentlemen that went to Ghana with me, he just wrote a book. I'm looking to have him on the show. What's the name of the book? It's called The Savage something, Marcel Womack. Anyway, we're going to have him on the show. We're going to talk about the book. But he was getting interviewed, and he said, he was saying, hey, some of the people I highlighted in the book, and I feel privileged to have been highlighted. He said, some of the people I've highlighted in the book, he's like, I ask a question about if you could have all the power in the world, what is the one thing you would do with that power? He asked me this question in Ghana. He said, Linnell, if you had all the power in the world and you can do one thing with that power, what would you do? And I told him I would eradicate racism. And here's the reason I told him that. And we're talking about mental constraints, right? One of the things we're talking about today is mental constraints. And the reason I told him that is because race is a human construct. It's a human construct. Somebody created this thing to divide us. And as long as we believe that we're divided, it hurts all of us. It really does. Now, I'm not telling you that we don't have a specific need in our community. It's one of the reasons I get up every morning, come down to WVON and get on the radio. Not something I have to do, right? This is a purpose thing. When I say the Creator places you in spaces, I've been placed in this space. But this is not the only space I've been placed in. Let me give you an example and why I believe this is so important. One of the things I do is I work with CEOs. We all know that in the Fortune 500, African Americans only make up 1.6% of the CEOs in the Fortune 500 category. Okay? The CEOs I support, to this day, I have yet to support a black CEO. Right? And by the way, it's not their fault. There's so few of them. Right? There's so few of them. However, the CEOs and the executive teams I do support, many of us are working for. And so when I make an impact with them, I make an impact on us. And I think we try to delineate and divide, and it doesn't work. Like at some point, and this is where I said what I said about the United States of America, like, we have to realize that we're all in this together. They have to realize that we're all in this together. And I'm not telling us, like, there's power in the dollar, no doubt. We need to do a better job spending our dollars with one another, no doubt. Like, I think sometimes it's like you can't say one thing and then have the other. And it's like, yes, you can. We need to do a better job supporting each other. We need to do a better job keeping the dollar in our community. And the better job that we do, the better off the United States of America is. Like, it's a both and. And I firmly believe that. And so we've got this. And by the way, it's part of the doctrine. Like, part of the American doctrine is division. And it's fascinating to me that this country has been as successful as it's been. And I'll tell you, I believe one of the reasons it has been is the doctrine of division that's established by the elites. They lead without division. They divide us, and we follow. Case in point, white boys and black boys have all died in wars. And I can guarantee you the elites and their sons did not fight in those wars. They may have financed them and made money on it, but they didn't fight in those wars. So we got to start figuring out that they see us all the same. And Steve said he's a multimillionaire, but he still don't have the bank to have the influence that the elites have, right? Myself, I'm a millionaire. You got millionaires speaking to you. I don't want to call them out because sometimes they don't want, but you got folks that call in that are millionaires. I've had folks on the show who are millionaires, black, doing well for themselves. And at the same time, what you begin to realize is the more money you make, like, oh man, this doesn't even begin to cut the pie in terms of the type of impact and power that is necessary to really, truly move not just our community, but the nation along. So, I mean, it's something to it. And this is, I think it's a mindset thing. Like, we allow our minds to rest in certain areas. And we have to reprogram our mind. Why would I eradicate racism? If there was one thing, like if there was one thing that I could do, why would I do that? Because it would create the type of unity and harmony in a world that I want my children to grow up in. That's why. And until that's done, until we begin to see the myth of color and race and how it all works, like we're all like, and again, you got to come at this from the proper setting. I am a spirit with the body. My body happens to be, like my car, happens to have a color. My truck sitting out there right now has no power whatsoever because the driver is gone. And what matters more is the spiritual journey I'm on, the spiritual mission that the Creator gave me. And that's all of us, the spiritual mission that we have, that we're supposed to fulfill. And one of the mental barriers that I see take place for many of us in this community is we allow the vehicle that we're driving to dictate the mission. This is a spiritual mission, not a physical mission. It's a spiritual mission. And I refuse to allow my mission to be dictated by the vehicle I'm in. I'm proud and happy for the vehicle. I think I happen to be a good-looking black man. You know, I do the best I can to take care of the temple that the Creator gave me. I'm grateful. And at the same time, I don't get it twisted. That it's not about the physical more than it's about the spiritual. Most people will try to change their lives by taking some level of action, right? Like, I'm going to get in action. A lot of times somebody might say, all right, Monday's tomorrow. Monday, I'm going to get back in the gym. And I believe one of the biggest mistakes we make is to only rely on action. And you guys know I'm big on action. But real change starts with how you think. This is why I always say vision equals discipline. What is vision? Vision is a form of thinking. Vision is a form of thinking. And so the real change starts with how I think. The real change starts with vision. So here are 3 steps to shifting your mindset. Number 1, we have to begin questioning our limitations. Whatever limitations that you perceive or you believe, every last one of them should have a question mark on them. Why can't we all be millionaires? Like there should be a question on that. Why can't you? Why can't you take yourself to the next level? And by the way, you have to look within yourself, because a lot of times they say, well, the system, too many folks in the system that doesn't work has created it. It comes down to your thinking. Is this, here's a question that you should ask yourself on a regular basis. Is this thought I'm having or this constraint I perceive really true? Or is it just what I've been taught to believe? Like, I've been taught to believe this way. I've been taught to think this way. And number 2, am I willing to reprogram my mind with the truth? Am I willing to replace my fear-based thoughts with possibility-driven beliefs? My fear-based thoughts with possibility-driven beliefs. And then the other part is, once I begin to identify that, I need to surround myself with growth-minded people. We talked about the law of vibration and frequency to start the year. Then I need to get into the right vibration. Environment is always stronger than willpower. One of the reasons that it's so easy for me to get up and go to the gym at 5:30 a.m. is because there's a group of men waiting on me. The night before, they go, you in? Right? There's a particular frequency around that supports the goal that I have. And so the only way for us to begin to break free is to see yourself differently. Like, you have to begin actually viewing yourself as different. And I'm going to go right back to it. You are not a physical being, solely a physical being. You are first and foremost a spiritual being that has physical properties. And I think we got to get that. We got to get that really, if this is the first time you heard it that way, it seems like a mental twister. You got to meditate on that thing. Because when we start viewing ourselves that way, it changes everything else. So as you go into the week, the first thing I would challenge you to do, and even for me as I'm sharing this, it's like, okay, let me search myself. Identify one mental chain holding you back for yourself. Now, here's what happens, especially for folks who are married. They'll be listening to the show and they'll be like, I know your chain, baby. I know what chain is holding you back. I didn't say your spouse's chain. Identify. That's another way we hold ourselves back, focusing on other people. Like, what is one mental chain that is holding you back? And name it. Name it. Write it down. Like, because, we like to come with vague. Well, I would say maybe it's this. No, ain't no maybes. Like, if there's somewhere you want to go and you haven't arrived, then what is the thing holding you back? In coaching, at Insights for Life, we have this four-step process. And we call it the 4 cycles to transformation in coaching. And the first one is awareness. And you cannot transform your life unless you're aware of what needs to take place and why it needs. Like, there has to be some level of awareness. And the reason for that is because awareness actually drives access to choice. If I'm not aware of it, I can't choose it. Right now, my wife and I are foodies. We like really good food, especially really good healthy food, right? And I'm sure there's a phenomenal, like the food is sourced properly, sustainably sourced, organically sourced restaurant here in Chicago that we're not aware of. And because we're not aware of it, we can't choose it. Like, until we become aware of it, we can't choose it. That is the power of awareness. So what is the one mental chain holding you back? And you have to fight for your awareness so you can choose out of it. You can choose to break it. If you don't know what the chain is and where the chain exists, you can never break it. That's number 1. Number 2, begin rewriting the story you've been telling yourself. I was listening to the caller. I heard a story. I'm not going to go into it. I'm a coach. I hear things. You know what I mean? It was a good call, no doubt. But I mean, as a coach, you're like, rewrite the story you've been telling yourself. We live within the stories we tell ourselves. If I tell myself a story about my health, well, I come from people who've always struggled with this, and, that's what it's going to be. My children probably going to struggle with the same things, and so, I know that I probably should, do a few things differently. But even if I changed them, I'll probably always be dealing with this. So, it's kind of how it is. Then guess what? That's how it is. We live within the stories we tell ourselves. And by the way, as human beings, we are phenomenal storytellers. And the majority of the stories we tell ourselves are not true. They're simply not true. We just been informed to think that way. We'll tell ourselves stories about our health. We'll tell ourselves stories about our spouse. As a matter of fact, it's always their fault. They married the perfect person. And I tell you, if I wasn't married to them, I'd be soaring right now because I'm the perfect person. And it's all them. We could be doing so much if it weren't for them. And if that's your story, you'll sit with it. It ain't true, though. I can promise you it's not true. It takes two. Always takes two. But in your relationship, you will tell yourself a story. We'll tell ourselves stories about our children. Well, I guess he's just that way. It's like, no, he's that way because you don't discipline him. You don't hold him accountable. You don't push. You don't become uncomfortable with a vision based on the vision you have for their life. That's why your child shows up that way. It's just not how they were born and the way they are. You're not doing your job. But we'll live in a whole nother story, and then when they disappoint us, we'll go, I don't know, why would God do this to me? Like, he didn't do it to you. You did it to you. And you did it to them. We'll tell ourselves stories about our work. Well, I don't really like this job, but, it's the best that I can do. And, I need to be grateful. Like, we'll pick and choose. I'm going to be grateful for this. And, it's not. It's kind of like, well, maybe that's a place where you need to be dissatisfied and discontent so you can get more. What's the story you're telling yourself? A lot of us tell ourselves stories about money. Well, we're doing good. We're just fine. We're fine where we are. We don't really need to do all that. It's like, okay, well, that's where you'll be. The other story is, man, it's like it's always a struggle. I'll never really earn it's always going to be this way. It's like, man, if it's not one thing, it's another. Oh, here's another bill that I'm not expecting. And it's just like a reciprocal cycle. But it's part of the story you tell yourself. It's the same thing spiritually. It's the same thing within purpose. Until you begin to rewrite your mental story, nothing shifts. We live within the stories we tell ourselves. So number 2, identify the chain. Number 1, identify the chain. Number 2, rewrite the story. You live within the guardrails of your mental narrative. There's some things that if I can make it mandatory, like a mandatory vaccine, like what they tried to do to us, well, actually, they were pretty effective. Like, line up, come get this shot. It'd be a story-changing shot. Empower story for you. Empower story for you. If I could. Here's the thing: if I actually developed the formula and I did it, they'd arrest me. Hey, what are you doing? Stop! You don't have a license for that. This is how it works, man. Number 3, set a small, immediate action step. Like, once you identify this chain, and you're like, okay, I need to rewrite the story. Maybe you say, okay, I'm going to read this affirmation daily, and you do it. Because stories have to be unraveled. You just don't unravel it in one conversation. We can't just unravel it in one show. Like, if there's a mental chain there, like, it actually requires pressure to break that chain. And there's nothing like pressure over time. One of the beautiful things about traveling is you'll see these rivers that have cut through rock, and like these beautiful cliffs and gorges, and you just kind of marvel at the Creator. But more than anything, you marvel at how the Creator has allowed each part of His creation to interact with one another. And there was a point in time where that rock wasn't cut that way. That same rock that if you run up against it, it will break you. Water that bends just kept hitting it over time and wearing it down. And before you know it, it cut it in half. And that's how chains are broken each day, every day. They say it takes 21 days to break a habit. I think the power of habit. In the book, he said actually it's not 21 days; it's about 40 days, whatever it might be. If you just stick with it, you can begin to get around it. Number 4, accountability. Find someone to hold you to your commitments. I think this is one of the real true benefits of the Slay Your Goals coaching community. You know what's tough? When I first started this work, it was a blog, inspirationalperspective.com. And I put the mission of the blog was if I can just reach one person. And the reason my mission was one is because from the time I started this work, I knew it wouldn't be most. It disappoints me every time. And the reality sits that I know that it won't be most. But because of that, I don't know how many thousands of people hear my voice right now, but most of you will wake up tomorrow and change absolutely nothing. Most of you. That's how it plays out. Will you be the small few that listen to this and you take radical action? Or will you be among the most who, it's like, that was really good. All right, so what are we going to have for breakfast? And it's over. You don't have to be most. I'm grateful that I'm not most people. Man, I love the life of being one of the few. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with being an outlier. I'm okay with being weird. I'm okay with being a little different. Because I believe that by being a little different, I'm being fashioned and molded in exactly the way the Creator wanted me to be, unique. So will you take one action today that your future self will thank you for? Your past does not define you. Your willingness to act is what defines you. What action will you take today that your future self will thank you for? What action will you take today that your future self will thank you for? Thank you for watching Inspirational Perspective. If you love this show and you want to see more content like this, you can go right here. And if you like this subject and you want to see much more content that we have available for you, just click the button here. As always, thanks for watching. Be sure to watch the show live, 7 a.m. every Sunday morning on WBON Radio, or you can catch it right here on YouTube or Facebook.com/Coach Liddell Harris. Be sure to hit that like button. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so we can get more content just like this to you.